All right, everybody, I think we can get started with the introduction. Hello, and thank you for being here. My name is Hilary Atleo, and I'm the owner of Iron Dog Books, an independent bookstore located in North Vancouver, not North Vancouver, in Vancouver. I also serve on the BookNet Canada Board of Directors, where I represent Booksellers and the Canadian Independent Booksellers Association, known as CIBA, one of the co-hosts of this session. Welcome to Green Paths, Building a Sustainable Future in Bookselling. Before we get started, BookNet Canada would like to acknowledge that its operations are remote and its staff contribute their work from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wyandot, the Mi'kmaq, the Ojibwa of Fort William First Nation, the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi, and the Métis. The original nations and peoples of the lands we now call Beaton, Brampton, Guelph, Halifax, Thunder Bay, Toronto, Vaughan, and Windsor. BookNet encourages you to visit the nativeland.ca website to learn more about the peoples whose land you are joining from today. Moreover, BookNet endorses the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and supports an ongoing shift from gatekeeping to space-making in the book industry. I am joining you from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations. For today's webinar, if you are having difficulties with Zoom or have any tech-related questions, please put your hand in the chat or email techforum@booknet.ca. BookNet is providing live ASL and closed captioning of this presentation. To see the captions, please find the Show Subtitle button in the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen. If during the presentation you have questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A panel found in the bottom menu. Lastly, BookNet would like to remind attendees of the Code of Conduct. Please do be kind, be inclusive, be respectful of others, including of their privacy, be aware of your words and actions, and please report any violations to techforum@booknetcanada.ca. Do not harass speakers, hosts, or attendees or record these sessions. We have a zero tolerance policy. You can find the entire Code of Conduct at bnctechforum.ca/code of conduct. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Fanny Valembois supports organizations in the book industry in their ecological transformation efforts. She leads a research project entitled Decarbonizing Books and Publishing. Fanny co-authored the study on sustainability in the bookselling sector, published through RISE Bookselling, a project run by a division of the European and International Booksellers Federation, EIBF, and co-funded by the European Union. Our second presenter is Amber Harrison, who worked in sustainability in the corporate world for nearly 2 decades before co-founding FOLDE Dorset, a bookshop which focuses on nature writing. Winners of the Nibby's Independent Bookshop of the Year for the Southwest in 2024, the bookshop runs on sustainable and purpose-led principles such as reducing waste, measuring its carbon footprint, and working with local suppliers. FOLDE Dorset was certified as a B Corp in 2024, meaning it meets high levels of environmental and social impact. With her business partner, Karen Brazier, they champion nature through conservation coupled with gentle activism on topics like biodiversity, right to roam, and water quality. Amber is also the first sustainability mentor for the Booksellers Association and a member of the BA Sustainable Bookselling Group. I'm going to turn the presentation over to you, Fanny and Amber.
Hi, thank you for having me. Just give me 1 second to start the presentation. Up. Can you see it? Is it okay for you? I guess it's okay. So thank you again for having me. Thank you to all the team for the organization and Hilary for the nice presentation. I will speak a few minutes about the study and Hilary just introduced the study, so I can have a little bit more time for the rest of the presentation. I just would like to say that it's a teamwork and we've been two searchers to work on this. My colleague was David Piovesan, who used to be a bookseller by himself and is now a university professor working on the bookselling sector and the way it faces nowadays challenges. And for me, I have never been a bookseller, but I'm working with the book industry, and I've been working for 4 years now as a climate consultant. So I work either with publishing houses, bookstores, obviously, libraries, and book fairs. And I'm French, speaking from France, where it's night and very rainy. So excuse my English, and I hope it will be okay. Just let me know if I'm not clear enough. So the report is available on EIBF RISE Bookselling Project website. And you can find the report itself with a short version and a long version. We know booksellers are very busy people, so you have a short version if you need it. You have here a self-assessment table, and I will speak a little bit about it and the way you can use it. And we also participated in a podcast called Sustainability Series. So we also presented the study on the podcast. So you can choose the way you prefer to get through it. The study is, we wanted it to be very practical and down to earth. So we chose 6 different topics, areas, where bookshops can decide to work to reduce their ecological impact. Of course, there is the energy part, the way you can save energy, waste management, circular economy, shipping, delivering, ordering books, all about IT and all the digital technology you can use in your bookshop. And then we have 2 parts, one about customers and the way you can involve them and work on raising their interest on the topic. And the last chapter is about management and how you can get started and get organized. Yeah. In each chapter, you will find a very short introduction about why we think this specific topic is relevant and important for your bookstore to work on. It's quite short, and then we tried to get very, again, specific and concrete on how you can do. And I will just show you a few examples. So that's the self-assessment table. And you can see here the chapter and all the subparts. So for example, for energy, we've been through how can you save electricity, heating, aircon, but also how can you consider changing your energy supplier or your heating systems. And as you can see, you can use this summary, let's say, to conduct a self-assessment. At the end here, you can decide if your bookstore has already done or not some efforts on each of these topics. So it's a tool, I think an easy one that you can just take and start using. I will start with what do we know now about the ecological impacts of the book industry? I think it's important to be very clear on where are the main impacts so that we know where to act. So we will have a look at a few, only 2. Carbon footprint analysis, and I will be very, very short and very quick. The first example comes from, a bookstore chain from Slovakia named Martinus, and they conducted their carbon footprint analysis. As you can see, the result is very clear. Alors, I have to say that Martinus chose not to measure and to count customers' transportation to the bookstore. And we will see another example with customers' transportation, because it can be important. But here we only, let's say only, have book production, book transportation, and then all the life of the bookstore with energy, but other purchases, and so on. And as you can see, by very, very far, it's the book's production that will drive the carbon footprint. We can have a look at a second book chain. It's Cultura in France. So they decided to include the client's transportation and travel to the bookstore. You can see here again the products manufacturing. So it's more than half of the greenhouse gas emissions. And then you have travel of the clients here, 16%, travel of employees, and they are both way more than books transportation. So I think it's an interesting and important information to keep in mind, that if you want to work on transportation, of course, it's interesting and relevant to work on books transportation, but maybe it's easier and it will have more impact to work on people transportation to and from your bookstore. And as you can see, waste here and energy, especially electricity, will have a very little climate impact. It's not to say that we don't have to work on it, but if you want, for example, to work on your greenhouse gas emissions, then you need to focus on book production and transportation. Having said that, of course, a bookseller can feel that he cannot do so much about book production, but I will try to provide you with some examples on what could be done. Last information I want to share with you. We have a study in France. We've had a study in France about not only greenhouse gas emissions, but the impact of a book on all his life cycle on different ecological issues. So you can find climate change, but also air pollution with fine particles, for example, resources, impacts on water, and so on. And the color is not very clear, but you can see this light green here. It's the manufacturing, so the book's production. And then you've got transportation and end of life. And you can see it's very clear that on every different level or type of impact, it's the book production that will have the main impact. So the road is very clear. If we want to mitigate ecological impacts, we need to do something about book production first, and then, of course, everything else. So I hope I'm not too quick, too fast for the interpreter. Just let me know if you want me to slow down. I will go through a few examples of what booksellers can do. I will start with an easy one, and we will maybe get deeper or harder. An example from France with a bookstore that wanted to go zero waste, and they decided to replace all the wrapping paper with reused fabric. And they asked the customers to bring their own reused fabric, of course clean, so that they had a pile of stock to wrap books. Of course, they don't provide anymore any bags to the customers, and the whole bookstore tries to be zero waste. Another example from again the French bookstore chain Cultura. It's about the pallets they use to deliver the book. You know, in the trucks. I'm pretty sure you've seen that. You have that pallets, and most of the time it's wood pallets that are really heavy, sorry, and can be used in average about 30 times. So they decided to go with plastic, recycled plastic pallets that can be used 80 times, so more than twice, more than 2 times more utilization, sorry. And the second interest of the plastic pallets is that they are way lighter. So it's better for the people that will use it. And it's also better for the trucks that will use less fuel, of course, to deliver them. Another example about transportation, let's say, is the way you can use bike for book transportation. You've got here an example. I think it's an Italian mobile bookshop on bike. Very nice, I think. And here is an English one with book delivery by bike. And nowadays you can deliver even big quantities of books with bikes. Obviously, it won't be a solution for every bookstore, and depending on where you're located. But I would like to show you that Amazon is working on moving from trucks to bike delivery, and I think it should maybe warn some bookstores. If they do it, we need to be able to do that as well. As we all know that trucks will be less and less welcome in the cities, so we need to have solutions to keep delivering books to bookstores. Two other examples on how a bookstore can work on the bike culture. You've got here several bookstores in San Francisco working together to celebrate the bookstore day, the Independent Bookstore Day, with a bike travel through the city, and people had to bike to as many bookstores as possible. And here you can see a bookstore that will provide a nice bike parking to customers. Different example, here is a US bookstore that implemented solar panels and now cover 100% of their electricity needs with the panels, and also can offer electric vehicle charging station for the team and for the customers. So it's also a way to promote, let's say, green energy to the team and the customers. And then, obviously, your core business is books. So what can be done with your books in the bookstores? First example, quite simple. Of course, you can promote, you can highlight books speaking about ecological transition, about all the environmental issues, the solutions, and so on. So here is a French example, but I'm pretty sure you have a lot of examples from your side. I really like this example. It's a very small bookstore in the countryside in France. And this is a Christmas catalog. So you can see all the books covers, and this color square here indicates in which country is printed the book. So we can see there is a color code. In green, it's been printed in France. Orange is for Western Europe or Eastern Europe or China. And they just provide the information, and they don't do anything more. But then at least the clients, the customers have the information on where is printed the book. And maybe one day we'll start considering if he wants to buy a book locally produced or not. It's also maybe a way to put a little bit of pressure on the publishers. If they have a look at the Christmas catalog and know that this information is shared with customers, maybe if several bookstores start having this kind of catalogs, it can have an impact and a drive to change. I just said that most of the impact for the book industry comes from the book production. So that means that if we want to reduce the impacts, we can reduce production. And one good way of doing that is second-hand books. Here is an example, and it's a market that is very flourishing in France. I don't know the situation, but I am curious about your markets. And more classical, traditional bookstores start having their own second-hand books sections. Either they will buy books, either they will have partnerships with specialized organizations, but you can find more and more second-hand books in French bookstores. I'm also very interested in having discovered some offers of book rental. This one here is in Sweden. It's a huge chain called Academy Bokhandel, and they provide every year a selection about 50 titles, titles, and you can borrow one, and when you want, you bring it back and change it with another one in the selection. And at the end of the year, you can keep the last book you've read or liked. But I've discovered this system in Sweden, and I got very interested in this idea. And then I looked for other examples, and I could find quite a lot. There is, for example, a book rental service in India. To be honest, in India, it's also because the public library is not developed as it can be in maybe in France, for example. But in the US, where you have there are libraries, you also can find some book rental systems. Most of them focusing on students and university books, but not only. And you can have it's mostly online. Sorry. But yeah, you can find a lot of online offers about book rental. And I think that's my last example, and I have spoken very quick, sorry. In France, and I'm pretty sure it's the same in Canada, booksellers very often feel overwhelmed with the book production and the new book release rhythm. In France, we have new books released 4 days a week. And every day, in average, we have 300 new books. So it's crazy, obviously. And some booksellers have decided that they want to fight against this system. So we've got 40 bookstores in France and Belgium that have decided to make a pause and just stop buying new books, new release for a while. So they could decide either they only pause for some very specific publishing houses, the big ones, for example, or if they pause on only, I don't know, children books or only fictional books, they could decide the way they do that. And how long? Some of them have done that for 2 months, for example, and some of them have just tried for a few weeks. The idea was to deliver a message to publishing houses, but also to gain back some time, just to read books and to work on the bookstore, and not spending all their times ordering books, sending back unsold books, and so on. I think you can see what I mean. So what is very interesting in this experimentation is that they conducted a survey, let's say, with the 40 bookstores that have been part of the experimentation. And the business result was as good as the year before. So no change in the business results. And the customers didn't even notice the change. They didn't even they were not able to see any difference. There are so many different books that if for a few weeks or a few months you don't provide new ones, no one can see the difference. So it was quite a shock, I think, for some of them. And they are starting again the same experimentation this year with a little bit more bookstores involved. So we've seen what are the main impacts, book production, what can be done, a lot, and you can have very everyday, quite maybe small gestures, or you can have very engaging and maybe deeper actions. And just to finish, I will finish with where to start. How can you decide, how can you organize yourself to start a journey, to start an experimentation or something like that? As I said, I think you can use the self-assessment table, and maybe you can just use half an hour or 1 hour with your team in the bookstore. It can be very interesting to do it with maybe your suppliers, maybe your customers, why not? And just to go through it, all the list of a lot of actions, very different actions that could be done, and decide where you are. Have you started? Are you on your way? Are you already very good on this point? And maybe you can help other bookstores to get engaged and get started. And then when you know where you're starting from, you can decide what you will do first. You cannot do everything at the same time. It's not possible, I think. It will cost you quite some energy, maybe some money, and obviously some time. So you need to have an action plan and to decide what you want to focus on. You can do that by different ways. You can pick up a theme and say, okay, this year we want to work on, I don't know, waste management, or we want to work on energy, and we will focus all our efforts on this. Or you can decide to work on topics you are really interested in. If in your team you've got bike people coming every day to the bookstore by bike, then maybe it can be interesting to walk with him and on to benefit from this interest and start with it. Or you can decide that you will start with actions that look easy, maybe not that costly, and can be done right now very quickly without too many efforts. Or last possibility, you can decide that you want to focus on a few actions that will have a big impact. It's also a way to choose. And all of those choices are absolutely okay. It's just you need to pick up something and to decide, okay, for this year, this will be our focus. And I will end with my last recommendation. Don't stay alone with those topics. I really believe that we need to work together on environmental issues and that kind of changes. So you need to find allies, and you will find a lot of resources nearby you. Maybe you've got a local business association. Obviously, you can ask your local and national booksellers association, and you can work together. Maybe the publishing houses also have their own programs, and you can work with them on their programs. But don't stay alone and try to find allies. And I will end here. Okay, I think I'm just okay with time. So thank you so much for your attention. Sorry about my English, and that's it for today. Thank you.
There we go. Oops. There we go. Hello, everybody. It's very nice to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. Over the next 10-15 minutes, I'd like to share with you our sustainability bookselling journey and what we've been doing to try and be a better business. So who is FOLDE? Well, thanks to Hilary and the lovely introduction. We are a nature-focused bookshop, and we're based in Shaftesbury in Dorset, which is a beautiful hilltop town. We're fairly new to the bookselling scene. We've only been around for about 4 years. And we came to bookselling, my business partner and I, from roles in the corporate world. We knew nothing about bookselling, but we jumped in with both feet, and we knew that whatever we wanted to do, it needed to be something that matched our values. So you can see on the screen our lovely front door. It might give you a hint around what we're about. Our focus is on nature and the environment. And when we set out, we decided that we had a key number of values which drove how we wanted to do business. And one of those is being sustainable, and another is being a champion for nature. So what do? We have a strong focus on nature writing, and we complement that with non-book items such as prints and cards from local printmakers. Our books around nature are very much focused on everything from rewilding to climate change and also nature fiction. But a really important aspect for us is to get people out into nature as well, rather than just reading about it. Our shop is tiny. We're about 350 square feet of trading space. And the pictures you can see on the screen here are taken from either end of the shop. So you can see we don't have much to work with. We do run events. We have 2 event seasons, but we're lucky we have an excellent hotel that we work with, because quite frankly, we wouldn't fit anybody in the shop. So let's talk about sustainability in our business and what that looks like for FOLDE. So from day one, we wanted to make sure that sustainability was a consideration. We didn't start out in our shop with a very big budget, so we needed to be practical about how we could fit out the premises. We took the shop over from somebody who ran it as a music shop, and it had a brown sticky carpet and click-clack fittings on the walls, but it did have a couple of useful bits of furniture, such as our counter, which we reclad and we reused and repainted. We repainted all the doors, we repurposed whatever we possibly could, and we brought lots of our own pieces from home. So our centre table is actually my grandparents' Victorian dining table, and it's nice to have a little bit of home in the shop. It also makes it feel very friendly. Another aspect was that we wanted our shop to look fair and look and feel very naturalistic. And so from the photo that you saw at the start with all the twigs around the doors, we have that inside as well to make it feel very much like you're in the countryside. But also, drawing on our corporate backgrounds, we wanted to make sure that we were using a good sustainability framework. And one of those, the icon you can see in the right-hand corner, is the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And these are 17 goals which are set out to make the world a better place. We don't support all of them because we're small and we can't, but there are a number that we do. So, for example, climate action, life on land, and responsible consumption and production. Those are 3 of the ones that we use. And so we try and think about how we run our business using a method that contributes to the greater good. We also wanted to become a B Corp, which is something that we achieved last year. And B Corp uses business as a force for good. And I'll talk about that a little more at the end. So when we set up our shop, aside from the decorating, and you can see here it's kind of nice and sparkly now, and there's our recovered counter, there are a couple of other things we did too. We made sure that we kept money in the local economy by using local traders for as much work as we possibly could for all the things that we couldn't do ourselves. We invested in low energy lighting, and we put some cost-efficient heating in, and that helps keep the business warm, but it's all on timers. And then we use a lot of rechargeable lights in the shop as well. And so we wanted to make sure that we had rechargeable batteries and chargers. We've even got a dehumidifier, and we made sure that we bought the most efficient one on the market. And some of these things are driven by cost, but they can also drive positive sustainable changes. So what does it look like day to day for us? Well, as a nature-focused bookshop, we're quite niche, and that makes it a little bit easier for us in managing our stock. So we know our audiences quite well and we know what's going to be useful. We often get offers of proofs, but we only take proofs and point of sale where we can actually practically use them, and we won't take anything that's made of plastic or anything that's hard to recycle. Where we can, we try and make sure that we have event orders pre-booked so that we don't order too much. And we're really picky with things like notebooks that have foil blocking on them because they can't be recycled easily. And we have this conversation with quite a lot of the retailers of lovely notebooks. For anything that's a non-book item like greetings cards, we source locally. And that has two benefits. Well, three actually. One, it means we don't have the same cards as everybody else. Two, it means that we're supporting the local economy and keeping that money local. And three, it means that things don't get stuck in customs or being shipped from miles away, and that can be really useful for particularly at Christmas. And then some other things that we do is we purchase with sustainability in mind. Even our loo roll is eco-friendly and bought locally. Everybody who joins gets a reusable coffee cup, and we try and make sure that we use recycled or recyclable packaging. I'd like to give you an example of some of the things that we use our packaging for. So you'll see that giant purple bag. It looks rather like I'm hovering, but I promise you I'm not in that photo on the right. We put all our book wrapping paper into this, and we take it to another shop who uses it to pack their trade orders. They call it free money. We call it a useful way of sharing a resource. And then in the top right, you can see that we reuse boxes, and we always say that it's a pre-loved box on a new adventure when we send it out. But we also pop a card into our orders so people know what we're doing and why. And then you'll see a lot of the things that we can recycle, from apple cores, batteries, plastics, and we have quite a complex system of recycling, which takes up a little bit of space in our kitchen, but we do measure and record all our waste by volume, and it goes into our carbon footprint that we do each year. Something else that we're very keen about doing is making sure that we know where we're spending our money. So with our utilities providers, even though we're tiny, we're not afraid to ask them what they're doing. So we've always used renewable energy, but we still try not to use too much of it. And we've asked our telecoms provider and our water provider what they're doing around sustainability, because we want to be sure that we're buying services that are good for the planet, as well as being fair on our pocket. Even down to our banks. So we have a big choice of banks in the UK, but we chose to go for one which uses renewable energy with a net zero target, which actually has good practices in place. We love bookshop.org, they're a fellow B Corp, and we talk with them quite a lot about what we can do. And even our delivery services, things like Royal Mail and Parcel Force, we want to know what they're doing and how they've got different actions that they can do to make the world a little bit more sustainable. So what would I recommend to booksellers on this journey? There's a lot of things that booksellers are doing which are fantastic. So for example, if you're reducing your waste or recycling what you can, and I love the example of the fabric book wraps from the French bookstore, put that through the lens of sustainability, because you're already doing amazing things in roles as booksellers. If you can, think about calculating your carbon footprint, even if it's just for your energy, or see where you think the biggest areas, if you do a little visual audit, might be in the checklist that was shared, is a really good way of doing that. And then have those conversations with your suppliers and your publishers. And this is something that we're trying to do a lot more now, is actually say to publishers, what are you doing? And as a bookseller, we need to be able to ask the questions of our publishers to say, this is a book about nature. Where's it printed? How's it been shipped? What are your thoughts around that? We also look to our own team for ideas and think about what we can change. There's lots that we'd love to do, but we can't do it all at once, so we have to be practical. We've set targets for ourselves. We have a Google Sheet with a series of sustainability KPIs, and we track our progress. We were lucky enough to get part grant funding from the Booksellers Association in the UK to refresh some of our lights in the shop recently, and there are other grants available. But I think one of the most useful things that we did before we became a B Corp was to look at the framework to see what the potential was. So there's a couple of things which are really interesting about the B Corp. It has a B impact assessment, which anybody can do. It's free, it's online, and it's confidential. And it's already been used by more than 150,000 businesses. And given that there's less than that in the terms of B Corps, it gives you an idea of how useful it can be. Anybody can use it. It's easy to use, and there's a link on the presentation, or just go to the B Corp website and have a go to jump in. It has 5 key areas. So it talks about governance, so how your business runs, workers, and what you can do for your workers in terms of their own financial, professional, and social well-being, community, and how you engage in your community and where you're based, what you can do for the environment and environmental stewardship, and how you can support your customers. And then it has a disclosure questionnaire as well. And this is really more for larger businesses who might be working in difficult areas like manufacturing or mining, for example. Now, there's around 200 questions, but don't let that put you off, because what it does give you is a really interesting and useful framework to talk or to think about how you might want to make changes in your business. And some of the questions, for example, around governance are linked to ethics, or they're linked to policies. And most good businesses, and certainly I think all booksellers I know, will have good practices in place, but they may not be formally written down yet. And so it can be a very good practice just to start thinking about formalizing some of the things that you already do. So there are 3 things it can do to really help. It can give you a health check in your business. It can help with some future planning or getting customer feedback. And it can also really help you to communicate and talk about the positive things that you're doing in your business. And sometimes I find that the bookselling trade can be quite shy about being proud and talking about what they're doing. So in terms of communications, we always say, tell people what you're doing, don't be shy, and tell them why you're doing it. So we share our goals and our ambitions with our team, but also with our customers. In fact, anybody who stops for 5 minutes to listen. We also like to have the shop as a platform for discussion, and for us, our passion is nature and the environment and the importance of keeping it safe and protected. So we consider ourselves gentle activists. We talk about the things that matter to us. But we also add sustainability to our communications. So if you look at our social media, or if you look on our e-news, on our website, we always talk about sustainability. And I've popped a link here to foldedorset.com/sustainability, because that lists in more detail some of the things we're doing, including our carbon footprint. And we're very open about this, and we talk about why it might go up or why it might go down. So what's next for us? Throughout this presentation, I've talked mainly about the environmental aspects of sustainability, but the social aspects are just as important for us. So we continue to be a place, a safe space for discussion around change and insight. We are absolutely and always will be inclusive and welcoming for everybody. Then from an environmental perspective, we want to decarbonise what we can and yet try and do more. We want to be a sustainability champion for our sector, and so I'm active in the Booksellers Association, seeing what we can do as we talk to publishers or as we talk to industry groups to say, actually, there is a demand here. People are keen. So we're on our journey, and I always like to say that sustainability is never done, it's never finished. We've got lots more to do, but I hope this at least has given a little bit of insight of what a tiny bookshop is doing in Dorset. And just to finish off, here we are. This is us on our little cobbled street with the youthful faces of new booksellers. We are online. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're in Shaftesbury in Dorset, do please come and say hello. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Amber and Fanny, for all the information in your presentations. We have quite a few questions in the chat. So for the next 13 minutes, I think we will move to sort of a discussion format with the two of you. And just because you were just speaking, Amber, we're going to lob something, I think, a little bit more straightforward at you. What was the easiest or a surprisingly easy initiative that improved your sustainability efforts?
Oh gosh, I think probably one of the easiest was finding a partnership with our fellow independent bookshops to make sure that we weren't throwing away cardboard boxes and waste. And that was driven partly by cost, because it seemed crazy that one independent shop, they manufacture candles, was paying to buy packaging material, and we would have to pay to get rid of packaging material. So for us, that was a really easy, quick win.
We did the same thing at our shop, and yes, 100%. It's just amazing when you're like, I'm not paying for the recycling, and someone is getting this material. It's really great. Fanny, we had a question that was about the way you calculate the transportation cost of books. Is it just for the last leg of the books, or is it entire travel of the product? And just some context, in Canada, we have many, many different publishers and distributors that we purchase from. So I know that in other countries, there can be kind of one primary wholesaler who you're purchasing from, but here we have independent relationships with all the different publishers. And so we may be getting some things shipped from a local warehouse, but which have been shipped, from England or from America on the East Coast.
So I'm not absolutely sure to understand the question. Maybe it was about bike transportation. No, I'm not sure.
The question is the book transportation, and I know it was from early on in your presentation when you were talking about the relatively low percentage of transporting the book.
No, of course, it's I think it's from the printer or from the distributor, but in the first place. And really, if you look at the whole book life cycle assessment, we all have an idea that transportation has the main impact. From a carbon perspective, it's not true, really, because manufacturing a book, and especially producing paper, uses a lot of energy. You have to imagine that I will give you a tree, and you have to make it, it's crazy the amount of energy you need to do that. Then, of course, transportation has a lot of negative impacts, including air pollution, including land artificialization. Can I say that in English? I hope so.
Very good.
When you have a look at the carbon footprint assessment, it can give you an idea that, okay, I just need to work on book production. But if you look at other impacts, then it's still very relevant to work on transportation, to work on card box and waste management, but from different perspective. And that's something sometimes a little bit tricky. You have some actions that will be very effective on carbon, and other ones on pollution, and other ones on maybe waste management. And we need to work on all of them. But the same action does not have the same impact on each of the issues. I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, I think that's very good. Did you have anything you want to add, Amber? About transportation? No. We had a question about how to make sustainability more approachable for booksellers, which I think both of you could speak to. And I was also wondering if in answering that question, you could also say, if we are going to work collectively to advocate as booksellers with publishers, what's the single most important thing for us to advocate for? So how to make it approachable for booksellers, and then how to work together to do our advocacy with our partners. Amber, do you want to answer first?
Sure. I mean, I think for booksellers, think about what sustainability might mean. So I always use the expression of putting a sustainability lens on your business. So if you think about waste, think about the different waste streams. Where is your waste coming from? What does it look like? Do you need all the proof copies that come? Do you need all the associated merchandising that might come with a new shiny release? That counts under sustainability. So I think there are a number of things that you can look at and, as Fanny said, think about the ones which are most important or the ones which are most manageable, and don't try and do everything at once, because you've got to balance your business with being sustainable and financially robust, as well as doing all the other things. And booksellers don't tend to have that much spare time.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I agree. Maybe I think it's important to find a connection between the ecological issues and the economical issues. I don't know the situation in Canada, but in France, bookstores, booksellers are struggling to find an economical balance. And I really believe that the new books overproduction is bad either for the environment and for business. So there is a way maybe to to fight and to be together, to send a message to the publishing houses and to say we need to protect the environment, the planet, and also our businesses. And we want we want the nature to be alive, but also bookstores. And maybe there is something common here.
Yes, we know we have an overproduction problem in the industry. It's built into the model, and we need to unbuild it. Let's see. There's so many good questions here. A good question for practically, how did you remember this? The projects can feel really huge, as you've said, while you are like boots on the ground, also just literally opening the door every day. So do you have any tips for how to keep opening the door every day and also move forward on sustainability goals?
I mean, one simple thing that we do is we measure our waste volume. Every time we put the rubbish bin out, we pop it onto the post scales and put it onto the wall planner. Doesn't mean it gets put into our tracker every week. Often it doesn't get done for 6 months, but I know that the data is there, so I can capture it in a quieter moment. Another option is, if you have a team, is ask one person or two people to look after a particular area or to think about ideas. Also, we talk to a lot of other bookshops and we talk to the Booksellers Association to see what others are doing and to learn from them. So these are some of the different ways we do it. But another really important factor for us is not to put too much pressure on ourselves and just say, if we can do one thing, that's okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you've read Robin Wall Kimmerer's new book about the serviceberry.
Serviceberry, yeah.
That line where she says, we live in a time when every choice matters is really, I find empowering, where I'm like, just even one better choice matters. Fanny, just because I recognize we have 5 minutes and I think this is really important, so you can talk a little bit more about additional information that is in the report and how incredibly worthwhile it is and how everyone should go and read it. We have 2 questions that are directly related to the report. One is, will there be a follow-up, so additional research ongoing? And also a question of, have you looked at energy consumption for ebooks compared to physical books, which I know you have because I've read the report.
Yeah, so go to the reports for this part, and to make it very, very quick. There are only a few situations where ebook are better than paper book. And the only case is if on one ebook you read more than hundreds of books, then it's more interesting than paper books. But no, ebooks are not a solution. And saying very, very quickly, IT is very often not the solution. Sorry about that. And yeah, there is no magical solution, I'm afraid. And the second question, if we're going to have a follow-up, I don't know. So far, I'm working on a French research project focused on publishing houses, and we are trying also to convince them that they should publish less, and it would be better for their businesses as well. But we don't plan to translate it into English so far. And maybe I don't know if EIBF has a project to keep going with studies. We had a recommendation to them, which is maybe not more studies, but create and facilitate workshops or working groups from, I mean, people like Amber, and we have amazing booksellers in other countries that sometimes feel very lonely because they are doing their best in their businesses and they need to find, people to discuss what is next step, how can we go further, and so on. So I think that would be a very interesting next step if possible.
Certainly feeling isolation is a big deal in Canada because we're such a small population in such a huge area. And so building that connection has been a major priority of CIBA. There's a great question regarding the SDGs, which, if I'm remembering, is Sustainable Development Goals. Is that okay? Good. The question is, they are such a wonderful suite of tools. Do you have any suggestions on how to get more awareness of them into places that aren't tied to government or massive corporations? So other small bookshops or small publishers or local places. For either of you, do you have any suggestion for how to get the SDGs more visible?
I think for us, talk about them. So on the sustainability page of our website, we highlight the 4 SDGs that we feel we particularly align to, and we say why. And we talk about them a lot. We say, have you heard of them? We probably get, a little bit of an odd look because they aren't common. But I think they are a really, really good way of just thinking about what some of the bigger issues are. And there's things like quality education. Responsible consumption and production is a massive one, to your point, talking about overproduction of books. Climate change, and also partnership for the goals, really, really important. Lots of people are working together on all kinds of projects. So I think my answer to that would be talk about them, become an SDG bore.
Okay. We're very close to the end here, but maybe, Fanny, last question for you, and Amber, feel free to jump in if there's something that you just think is so compelling. Because you work with publishing, what are some publisher initiatives that you've seen very effective for reducing carbon footprint or sustainability goals?
Yeah, it's really the beginning of the journey. But we do have some publishers in France starting to reduce production. So I think it's the biggest impact they can have. A lot of them are working on eco-conception, eco-fabrication, eco-manufacturing. So of course, it's interesting to see if they can change paper or printing process and so on. But yeah, some of them, and most of them, it's for economical reasons, are starting to reduce the amount of new books every year. So we are trying to have a look at it, and we'll keep you updated.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Amber?
Yeah, there's a couple I can think of. There are some some publishers who are starting to publish in the UK, which is fantastic. So it means that books aren't being distributed. I think it was HarperCollins who have been trialing transporting European printed books by train. And then there's also been some test prints using slightly lighter typefaces that don't impact legibility at all, but use less ink. So small steps like that can make a big difference.
Okay. There is so much we can work on. This is amazing. We're at 12:01, so I think we will wrap up, but it's just been really, really excellent to hear from you, and I strongly recommend everyone read Fanny's report. I know it's not only your report, Fanny, but I shall say it is yours. So thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, the Tech Forum would love it if you could provide feedback on this session. They will drop a link to the survey in the chat. Please take a couple of minutes to fill it out. They will also email you a link to a recording of this session as soon as it's available. And they would also like to invite you to their upcoming session, AI in Publishing, Your Questions Answered, scheduled for February 20th. Find information on all upcoming Tech Forum events and recordings of previous sessions on their website, bnctechforum.ca. Lastly, BookNet would like to thank CIBA for their partnership and the Department of Canadian Heritage for their support through the Canada Book Fund. And thank you to everyone for attending.